Books that have influenced my writing the most, fiction edition. One of the only books I have ever read cover to cover twice. It's probably my favorite book ever. Lengel's view on the inherent value of human life and the possibility of redemption have really shaped a lot of my core ethos. But there's also this way Lengel has of chopping up sentences with periods for emphasis. My editor does not like it when I write in that style, and early readers in Elizabeth's Legion don't seem to care for it either. So I've mostly dropped it, but I do occasionally sneak it in. This was my introduction to military fantasy. I have written one fan letter in my entire life, and it was to John Marco. The Jackal of Nar was the first time I read a book that explores this idea of heroes on both sides of a war. There's not a good side and a bad side, per se. There are a lot of generally decent people caught up in the schemes of a few people in power. There are a few bad people in this book, like genuinely evil characters. But again, I appreciate that this book and this trilogy overall don't really have a good and a bad side. That is something I do try to capture when I am writing about conflicts between people. This short story illustrates the concept of protecting the majority at the expense of the minority. The story asks the question, is it just for us to allow a few innocent people to suffer so that the rest of society can thrive? Dangerous Assassin was really influenced by this short story. Both Amira and Dangerous are seen as sacrificial lambs to the greater good by their respective parents. And Dangerous, at least, has a lot of conflicted feelings around serving the greater good versus saving his own soul. The central moral questions in Dangerous Assassin were very much inspired by Ursula K. Le Guin's short story. This is the first book I ever read as an ebook back when it was self-published in the Days of Yore. Kanani has a way of writing that is both dense with meaning and very digestible, so you read 400 pages and you didn't even notice. I love how detailed her world building is, and how she seamlessly blends inspiration from so many different cultures and time periods. Her stories feel like they are set in a real place with real history, and that is a feeling that I have been trying to write into my own books ever since. These books include La Morte d'Arthur, the Once and Future King, I Am Morgan Le Fay, The Crystal Cave, The Chessboard Queen, Sword of the Rightful King, all 10 books in the Squire's Tales, The Last Pendragon Saga, The Lion of Wales series, and I am sure there are others I'm forgetting. Arthurian lore just in general has been very influential to me, and that's what kickstarted my fascination with Celtic mythology and early medieval British history, both of which continue to heavily influence my writing. The sorceresses in Tears of the Wolf and Dangerous Assassin are very much inspired by the Arthurian enchantress archetype. A lot of historical fiction and even fantasy tends to focus on people at the top of government, like kings and queens and such. Wolf Hall focuses on a lawyer, a fictionalization of a real person, Thomas Cromwell. Mantell does take a lot of liberties, of course, but the story focuses on how ordinary people get caught up in the orbit of power. A lot of characters in my books are people who end up at the top, like Amira and Dangerous, but even when writing those characters, I try to think about how their actions affect ordinary people, and how we can have story consequences for that. The Thomas Cromwell trilogy also asks the question, how much power do people in power really have? How is power, even for someone like a king, dependent on keeping the right people happy? That question gets explored a lot in Vesh's subplot in Dangerous Assassin. I do plan on exploring it in Algar's subplot in the Wrath and Weeping series, and I foresee it will be a recurring theme in my writing indefinitely. There's this thing in my books where characters will sometimes refer to themselves as their roles instead of by their names or their pronouns. So like when we are reading from Amira's perspective, she might be called the assassin instead of Amira or she. This is a quirk I picked up from R.A. Salvatore. My editor doesn't love it, but I like it, and it can help clarify things in some cases. When I have two female or two male characters talking, using pronouns can get confusing, but using just their names can get repetitive. But if, say, Dangerous and Thadred are talking, I can refer to them as the Archduke and the Knight. And readers know who I'm talking about. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these or if you plan to check them out.